The St. Tammany Parish Board of Adjustment meeting Tuesday, May 7th is now called to order. Ms. Secretary, will you call the roll, please?
Christy Thomas. Mr. Guidry.
Here.
Mr. Gordon.
Here.
Mr. Snyder.
Here.
Mr. Fendel.
Here.
Mr. Brookter.
Here.
Mr. Ballantyne.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Did everyone get a copy of the minutes from the April 2nd meetings?
I did, Mr. Chairman, but on the first page, we got Ms. Thomas marked as present and as absent. It's very difficult to be absent and present at the same time.
I will
So I
sure,
would propose that we would take her out of the column that says present.
I will make the correction.
You also have me as present.
Yeah, I don't think Mr.
You were here in spirit, we just did that to honor you.
He said the same thing, Mr. Gordon, same way.
Okay.
Do we have any other corrections to the minutes?
No, sir.
Can I hear a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Our first case is BOA case number 2019-1436 BOA. Request by applicant in an A4 single-family residential zoning district for a reduction of the required front yard setback from 25 feet to 12 feet to allow for the construction of a single-family residence. The property is located at 266 Clara Drive, Slidell, Louisiana. The applicant is Brian Driscoll. The applicant is requesting a reduction of the required front yard setback from 25 feet to 12 feet to allow for the construction of a single-family residence. Staff comments, please.
As it was just stated, the variance is requested to allow for the construction of a 2,200 square foot single-family residence. Staff feel that there's no compelling reason to recommend approval of the requested variance, considering that there is no hardship being demonstrated. Although the property is only 65 feet in depth, meeting the front yard requirements of 25 feet will not prevent the construction of a single-family residence on the site.
Is the applicant present? Would you please come forward? You can stay, if you like also, you can come forward. Please state your name and the record.
Brian Driscoll. I live at number 4 Mary Ridge Lane in River Ridge, Louisiana. And I own the property at 266 Clara Drive.
Mr. Driscoll and Ms. Driscoll, do you have anything further to add?
Well, when I got the letter from the comments from the staff, I was kind of surprised actually. And I went and did a little research and found out there were multiple requests for variances in the subdivision. And the staff comments were quite different, so I was just curious on why that was. I feel like I'm just trying to build a reasonable sized home, and if I have to keep a 25-foot setback on the front and a 13 on the rear, it basically leaves 27 feet total, and if you build any porch or anything, like a 5-foot porch, that leaves you with 25 feet. I just think that's not really buildable.
Okay.
We're trying to build something equivalent to the neighbors, and they just moved in, they haven't even finished their house, and they had requested,
They requested a 12-foot variance, and it was granted.
and they granted. We just want to build a house, not bigger than that,
Okay.
just
I see we have a couple lights. Mr. Ballantyne,
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, I got a
you
question.
can put your mic on, Tom, please.
I don't know who can answer this, but are the homes on lot number 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, are they all now existing at 12 foot? I don't want to look at a drawing, I just want you to tell me.
Let me look at the drawing. Is it for the lot numbers on the drawing?
Yes.
For the rest of them down the street.
I think he's referring to this drawing.
15. Quite honestly, my neighbor's is 15, but his stairs are 5 feet. So some of them are 15 feet, some of them are 12 feet.
So essentially, none of them are 25.
I honestly, I did some research, and I looked at 97 properties in that subdivision.
what would you like to see?
64% of them are 12 foot or less.
It's just because the lots
The lots are so small.
and we have
Okay.
10 feet of our property is in the water.
I'm good.
The back's a 13-foot setback. That's really not an issue.
You like a, talk about house. It's actually unbuildable, we have a lot that we can't sell, nobody's gonna want to build it.
So I just request, we ask that you guys approve it.
Just, Mr. Gordon, you have a question? Make sure your mic's on, Greg.
Yeah, we've had at least a dozen of these, and we've approved every one of them. We have a letter from the homeowners association approving it, so I have no problem, and I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing no discussion, would everyone please vote with the lights?
Motion pass.
Thank you. Our next case is BOA case number 2019-1437, BOA. Request by applicant in an HC1 highway commercial zoning district to reduce the required setbacks on the north side of the property line from 191 feet to 42 feet. On the west side from 191 feet to 24 feet. On the south side from 191 feet to 183 feet to allow for the placement of a cellular tower in the rear of the property. The property is located at 58291 Highway 433, Slidell, Louisiana. The applicant is R&M Delaney, LLC. Mike Delaney, the representative for Verizon Wireless is Ryan Shahan. The applicant is requesting to reduce the required setback fall radius on the north side of the property line from 191 feet to 42 feet, on the west side from 191 feet to 24 feet, and on the south side from 191 feet to 183 feet to allow for the placement of a cellular tower in the rear of the property. Staff comments, please.
First, relative to whether there's a practical difficulty or hardship to be justified, the parent parcel does not appear to be large enough so that the leased area could be expanded in order to meet the parish setback requirements. So it is our opinion that a hardship or practical difficulty appears to exist to the limited area to locate the tower and possibly to comply with the parish setback requirements. Secondly, although there are some residences located on the north side and east sides of the site in question, the tower would not directly fall on any of the residences. And also, given the tower's design to collapse upon itself within 80 feet, it would not affect the adjacent residences. Third, there is an existing commercial building located on the site which appears to be approximately located 80 feet from the tower, inside the fall radius but barely outside the collapse area. Staff is not opposed to the requested setback variance. However, staff is concerned that due to the proximity of the tower to the existing building, it could create a health and safety concern for any of the occupants of the building, or also it could cause serious damage to the building if the tower would have to collapse.
Is the applicant present? Yes. Please come forward, please. State your name and address for the records.
That's Ryan Shahan. I represent, I work for J. Mark Hodges, Inc. We are officed out of Lafayette, Louisiana.
Mr. Shahan, do you have anything further to add?
Just to add to the last comment, thank you, Ms. Lambert, for the preparation for this. Do appreciate it. As far as the concern for the commercial building that is within the 80-foot mark, our towers, when we go through the permitting process, we do build them according to the approved Louisiana State Uniform Construction Code, which is the 2012 International Business Code. And according to that, we will comply with all of the requirements for wind speed, including gusts, including seismic, including ice, including all the other hazards that that tower can face. Across Baton Rouge, Lafayette, other metropolitan areas, we do have other towers that are within range of buildings, if not right next to buildings. And we do take the safety of the people that are around it and the utmost concern.
Okay. Mr. Ballantyne?
My question was about the commercial building. But the commercial building, you're gonna take all that precaution, all that, and if the staff is comfortable with that, I'm fine with it. But it doesn't negate the fact that the building is still within the collapse radius of the tower. Is that, am I got that correct?
It's right at the edge of it, yes.
Okay. I'm good.
Do we have any other questions of the applicant? Mr. Ballantyne, excuse me. We have a motion to approve and a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, would everyone please vote with your lights?
Motion pass.
Our next case is BOA case number 2019-1438. BOA, request by applicant in an HC2 highway commercial zoning district to allow for the placement of fill without mitigation, to provide adequate drainage for the construction of a commercial building on the property. The property is located at 2316 Gauze Boulevard East, Slidell, Louisiana. The applicant is Gary Dragon. The representative is J.V. Burks and Associates, Sean Burks. The applicant is requesting to allow for the placement of fill without mitigation to provide adequate drainage for construction of a commercial building on the property. Staff comments, please.
Mr. Chris Tissue will present the case. Mr. Chris Tissue will
I'm sorry,
present the case.
Mr. Chris. Just a second, I'll get you, let me get out of here, I'll get your mic on. Try that, see if it's on. Is it?
Yes, sir. Staff is in favor of the requested variance considering the quantity of fill required to be mitigated to allow for construction of a commercial building and to provide positive drainage cannot be mitigated on or off-site. Note that documentation shall be provided from a licensed engineer verifying that unmitigated fill will not cause an increase in the downstream water surface profile, and that any fill permitted should be limited to only what is needed to provide positive drainage of the site.
Is the applicant present? Please state your name and address the witness, please.
Yes, my name is Sean Burks. I work with J.V. Burks and Associates. We're the engineers on the project. We're representing Mr. Gary Dragon, who's the owner for the property.
Mr. Burke, do you have anything further to add?
We agree with staff comments and hear if anybody has any questions.
Board have any questions for Mr. Burks? Mr. Gordon?
Yeah, I'm well familiar with the property. He has no options. Make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve in a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, would everyone please vote with your lights?
You can, yes. Motion pass.
Thank you.
Our next case is BOA case number 2019-1440 BOA. Request by applicant in an I-2 industrial zoning district to increase the total number of allowable parking spaces in a row. Waive and reduce the size of some of the required parking islands, waive some of the required side green space areas, remove some existing trees within the northern green space area, waive some of the required Class A and Class B trees, remove some existing live oaks, allow for an additional driveway to the planting area, and waive the required setback to allow for a new elevated enclosed walkway to cross over the landscape buffer. The property is located at 133 Ashland Way, Madison, Louisiana. The applicant is MC Holdings of North Shore LLC. Representative is Gulf States Construction Services Incorporated, Jason Weaver. The applicant is requesting to increase the total number of allowable parking spaces in a row and waive to reduce the size of some of the required parking islands. Waive some of the required side green space areas, remove some existing trees within the northern green space area, waive some of the required Class A and Class B trees, remove some existing live oak trees, allow for an additional driveway through the planting area and a waiver required side yard setback to allow for a new elevated enclosed walkway to cross over the landscape buffer. Staff comments, please?
Mrs. Regan Contois will present the case.
Hello, is this on?
It should be on here.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to read through the variances one by one and give you the staff comment per variance. So the first variance was to increase the maximum allowable number of parking spaces in a row from 12 to 20. The applicant states that this design flexibility is needed in order to preserve existing oak trees. Staff is in favor of allowing this flexibility of island locations in rows where existing trees are proposed to be saved. They have modified their plans because the plans they gave us that didn't happen in every case. So at this point, staff supports the variance in rows where where there are trees to be saved. The second variance is to waive the 10-foot buffer on each side of the northern side property line and replace it with a 20-foot green space as shown on the plans. Staff is not opposed to the 20-foot buffer being shifted as shown on the attached plan. However, the new 20-foot green space must meet the commercial landscape buffer standards for each property line, and the required number of Class A and Class B trees shall be provided. The applicant has stated that they can provide that, just for reference. The third is to remove a number of live oaks as listed on the plan for a total of 340 inches of mitigation to be paid into the tree bank. The site and landscape plan previously submitted and approved in 2014 showed a larger number of live oaks to be preserved. The BOA recommended that the applicant pay the fee to the St. Tammany Parish Tree Bank to mitigate 246.5 inches of live oaks. The current variance is for the removal of an additional 68, in addition to the 246, of some of the better quality live oaks, which are grade B, to allow for more parking spaces. The proposed project exceeds the number of required parking spaces by 100 spots. Staff feels the applicant should reduce the number of spaces to better fit the site and preserve a larger number of live oaks. Staff would support the removal of the trees per the 2014 plan, which is the 246 inches of live oaks, but not as currently requested. The next variance is a waiver to allow for altered landscape island dimensions at the end of rows to accommodate circulation drive offsets to preserve existing live oak trees within the parking lot. Staff feels that this is a reasonable request and has no objections. The next variance is a waiver to allow a second driveway through the side buffer planting in lieu of using an allowed second driveway through the street planting. Staff feels that this is a reasonable request and has no objections. And finally, the final waiver is to allow for a new elevated enclosed sky bridge walkway to cross the landscape buffers to provide enclosed, convenient access to both buildings. Staff suggests the applicant re-subdivide the two parcels of land into one property in order to eliminate the need for a request of the variance to allow for the connecting structure between two buildings to cross the property line. Also, the proposed location of the skyway will require the removal of a 30-inch live oak, a 24-inch live oak, and a 12-inch live oak, and may possibly impact the canopy of several other large live oaks in the vicinity. In light of these issues, staff is not in favor of this request.
Is the applicant present? Please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. Jason Riebert, Gulf States Construction Services, 109 New Camellia Boulevard, Suite 100, Covington, Louisiana. As I mentioned, I'm Jason Riebert, Gulf States Construction Services. I'm here today on behalf of MC Holdings of the North Shore. Additionally, I have Tony Rossi, Vice President of Operations for Pelican Energy. The case before you today is the same case that was presented similarly in 2014 that received staff approval. The project involves the Phase 2 expansion of Pelican Energy. Their current Phase 1 building is constructed in Ashland Oaks Business Park, and this is the adjacent lot to that. Following the approval in 2014, the oil and gas sector of the economy started to experience some downturns. So Pelican Energy, unfortunately at the time, shelved the project for the foreseeable future. I'm happy to report now that the economy has improved and Pelican has secured some future consulting contracts for both present day and also into the future, which necessitates moving forward with the project as planned. During this downturn from the 2014 approval to now, Pelican has revisited their needs from both a functional and planning standpoint to better assess their needs, now and moving forward. In doing so, they reconfigured the building entry, which in turn allowed for some additional parking spaces to be constructed. That is materialistically the only major change to the site plan that was presented and approved by the board in 2014. The main needs for the expansion for Pelican Energy is both obviously to obtain some additional office space, provide the functional connection between their current Phase 1 building and their Phase 2 building by the reference Sky Bridge, but more importantly, provide the additional parking that's required from them both from a functional and practical standpoint. Presently, their Phase 1 building is overparked by code by 30 cars, but on any given day, for instance, this afternoon, you could drive into the parking lot and there are no available parking spaces to be had with routinely cars parked in the drive aisles just to gain access to the building. To further that, just this past week, they had a regularly scheduled client meeting, which occurs, I think, Tony, about once a month, sometimes twice a month. And they had the parking lot completely full with cars in the drive aisles and an additional 20 cars parked along Ashland Way. So based on their current needs, they're underparked from a functional standpoint as it is. And kind of comparing this project, if it was developed in other areas of the state, particularly Jefferson Parish or Slidell, as currently constructed, instead of being 100 cars overparked, we would actually be 30 cars short. Their parking requirements in both Slidell and Covington are Jefferson Parish and Slidell are 1 per 200 versus the 1 for 350 that's required here in St. Tammany Parish. So the parking being requested is definitely a functional and really a need for them moving forward. It is probably the primary concern with them moving forward, given their current issues with parking and their planned expansion in the future. The new office building will house upwards of 130 to 140 people. The office building is going to be constructed very similar to how they have their current office now, but more open office layout. There will not be a lot of private offices you typically see in a lot of older office buildings. The more modern approach is to try to cram as many people as you can into the building through cubicles. A lot of their staff is draftsmen and engineers, so the private offices aren't a necessity for them moving forward. So from a parking standpoint, the purpose of this expansion is to obviously satisfy their current parking needs, but also make sure in the future we don't run into an issue moving forward with their future growth as planned. The Sky Bridge, as Regan had mentioned, is also a very functional need for the project. By being able to find a lot adjacent to their current facility allowed them to keep their operations here in St. Tammany Parish, which was very important given a lot of their employees and critical executives are from the North Shore. By purchasing the second lot and having the ability to expand and connect functionally through the Sky Bridge is really going to allow Pelican a chance to grow and continue their growth in the future. So we're here to answer any questions you may have regarding any of the staff comments. And I got Tony Rossi here, again, Vice President of Operations for Pelican, to kind of discuss a little bit more about the parking needs and their requirements moving forward.
I got two questions. One, in one of the recommendations of the staff, it requires a payment to the mitigation bank. Are you all in agreement with that?
We are. We were going to make the payment initially, and honestly, the downturn was probably for the better to some extent because it really did allow Pelican to step back and kind of assess their growth needs so they do not fall into the same kind of predicament they're in now with the parking. So, no, the applicant has no issues with the payment to the mitigation bank.
And then the last comment is they didn't agree with one of your requests. And are you're Reagan, you and them, they're all in complete agreement with the plan?
Not sure I understand your question.
You denied, or you were recommended against approval of one of the requests at the end? Number 6?
Well, that's going to be up to your decision as to whether or not you agree with the Sky Bridge or not.
Yeah,
I mean,
and I could talk a little further on the Sky Bridge too. I know staff had suggested the possible re-subdivision of the properties. Unfortunately, with how the current mortgages are set up, it doesn't really necessitate the elimination of the property line. If we could, we would probably look into it. It would obviously eliminate the need for the Class A and B trees to be planted between that buffers. It would effectively eliminate the need for the 20-foot buffer to be maintained. But given the current lender situation, the lot line unfortunately has to stay, and our plan has worked around that to accommodate the offset landscape buffer, the 20-foot offset landscape buffer, and also provide the required A and B trees that's required by the parish.
Before we go any further, Mr. Rossi, why don't you just state your name and address for the record in case someone has a question of you that will be out the way.
It's Tony Rossi. I'm Vice President of Operations for Pelican Energy Consultants.
And your address, please.
It's 2649 Vulcan Street, Harvey, Louisiana.
In case you have a question. The next, Mr. Steiner.
Yes, for either one, are both parcels owned by the same entity?
Correct.
Okay, and yet you're saying because of a mortgage stipulation on one, you can't combine them into a single property?
Well, the intent was to, they have two separate mortgages on them presently with two different lenders.
Right.
So the intent was to keep the two projects functionally separate from a financial standpoint. While they may maintain similar ownership, it just gets to be very difficult on the lender side. If it forces them to refinance the property, which wasn't really part of the intent with the development moving forward. But to answer your question, yes, it is effectively owned by the same entity. And as I mentioned, eliminating the lot line would solve, it would make the development of the project slightly easier. Again, we would not have to provide the Class A and B trees or maintain the buffers between the two projects. But again, as I mentioned, we've worked hard to be able to accommodate that request while still keeping the lot line in place. So functionally, it's going to look, other than the Sky Bridge, as two separate projects, just functionally connected.
Well, I understand. I'm just thinking that since you own, it's under one ownership, it's your own lot line there.
It is.
And as you said, it's more of a financial interest to keep it that way. If you move away from that concept, I think you'd have a lot better chance of getting an approval for that part of the variance. But consider that.
Mr. Brookton?
Jason, I didn't hear you address the landscape bridge. About those live oaks, having to remove those if you keep that Sky Bridge in?
Yeah, that's correct. To functionally to connect the two buildings, which is a major requirement of the expansion for Pelican, and similar to the approval with the board in the past, there will be, I think, 3 live oaks that would need to come out that have been taken into account with the mitigation credits that we would be willing to pay. Fortunately, with where the Sky Bridge is to be located, there's a very short window structurally on the existing building for the Sky Bridge to be tied into, with where existing structural columns are, where the common core, where the elevators, the common area stairwells, bathrooms. That was always the intent, to be able to have the Sky Bridge exit or leave the existing building in a feasible location, and that's both from a structural building design side to a functional need with Pelican. So unfortunately, we do not have the ability to slide the Sky Bridge down 30, 40 feet to connect to the building. It's got to occur in a very, very small window, and that's the way the plan is currently designed around.
Are you done, Mr. Brookton? Does anyone else have any questions of the applicant? Does anybody need more time to think about this, or? Well, I'm not going to entertain, Mr. Ballantyne?
Yeah, I make a motion to approve the request for the variances, and as long as you
Excuse me?
What would,
Number 3 and 6 would not be included.
but Wes,
Wait a minute. Let's see if the motion is accepted, then we can discuss his motion to make sure it has to be clarified.
I don't understand what it is.
Yeah. Why don't you rephrase your, make your motion again, Tom?
My motion said that I make a motion to approve the variances as requested, subject to, them complying with and staying in lockstep with, Ms. Reagan.
Would that mean that on number,
Number 6, it would mean, that they would approve the Sky, Bridge as long as they pay into the mitigation.
so that wasn't in favor of Ms. Reagan, that's,
Would
approving
it be a
each-
request according to what they request, a motion to approve subject to or according to what the applicant is requesting?
so not what Ms. Reagan is requesting, is what the applicant is requesting? Okay, so we have a motion, do we have a second? We have a motion and a second, now we can open it up for discussion. Mr. Gordon?
All right, Reagan, aren't you guys against a couple of these things?
Well, my staff report is not recommending for removal of all of the live oaks that are shown in the latest version.
Right, so you all aren't in favor of it, so how do we
Confused on what you're,
gel that with the motion?
Because they're requesting all those things, and as long as Tom is abiding by what the applicant is requesting, then,
But he's not. He said, as long as they go along with what Reagan says.
no, I think he
I think he
reclarified.
revised it.
He clarified his statement.
So now you're just straight up approving the variance
As
as
the-
requested.
That's correct, that's his motion.
Thank you.
nothing was pleasing me.
Anything else, Mr. Gordon? Mr. Snyder?
Thank you. Regan, if it's my understanding, then, if they were to accept the 2014 plan and they would handle the lot line situation, then would you have any objections? Because it looks like numbers 1, 2, 4, and 5, you have no objections. Well, maybe, I'm not sure about number 1, but
Correct. If it's okay, I can just do them one by one. You know, increasing the maximum, number one, staff does not have any objections
Okay.
to. We're fine with that. They've modified the plan.
right.
Number two was to waive the buffers and slide the buffer. We don't have any problem with
Right.
that, so those two are fine. Number three, we objected to the new live oaks that were requested to be moved in the latest plan compared to the 2014 plan.
Which I understand is to increase parking, but if they went back to the 2014 plan, you'd have no objection?
That's what my staff report
That's correct,
says, yes.
okay.
Number four is to modify the parking islands. We don't have any problem with that. And number five is waiver of the second driveway. We don't have any problem with that. And number six is the Sky Bridge, which
Right.
that's up to you as to whether or not you want to do that or not. Staff didn't recommend for it, or in favor of it for the reasons shown, but if you decide differently, that's up to you.
Well, I guess my question on number 6 is if they did something about the lot line and mitigated those 3 oak trees, then would you have any objection? If, I mean, I'm being hypothetical here, but I'm posing this also to the applicant. Okay,
No, I guess
okay.
not. But I don't know that they want to change that lot line,
I
so I think
understand.
that might be a,
I understand. I was just saying, with those 2 items, basically 2014 plan and the lot line situation, everything else has already been approved, numbers 1, 2, 4, and 5.
correct.
I have nothing else.
I have one question, applicant. On your existing office building, the plan that I show, they show a lot of space on the other side. Is there a possibility of moving some of your parking to, I'm just going by this plan, what I'm looking
No,
at.
that's a fair request, and I can let Tony speak on that as well. But that area, if you go look at the present property, those are full of saved live oak trees. So those.
So that area has all live oak trees in
The
it?
company purchased, when it, in the first time, 2 lots, and basically, the owner created, park-like atmosphere with a bunch of mainly oak trees and some really big pines in there that he maintains like a park.
So moving some of your parking, there's no place to move some of your parking to,
It would
without taking out
require that there
live
be
oak trees.
We
live
would,
oak trees.
correct, we would be
Okay,
coming
I
back
just
to the
wanted,
board
because
for
my
that.
plan didn't show that.
Right, and, you know, and based on the needs of Pelican, as we've mentioned before, the parking is not just a request. I mean, it is a functional need for this company to continue their expansion in St. Tammany Parish. And like I mentioned, the downturn in the economy was fortunate in that the fact that they were able to go back, secure some additional contracts, both now and to the future, and really further define and understand where their parking needs are. And as I mentioned, if this project was being built anywhere practically other than St. Tammany Parish, just given where the parking requirements are, we would be underparked in Jefferson Parish or the city of Slidell presently. So while I respect the staff's recommendation regarding the excess parking, I understand that's what's governed in St. Tammany Parish now, but it's the way office buildings have been constructed and the way office layout has been going, the 1 per 350 is absolute minimum. Functionally, almost every single user who is going to these open office plans, which have a much more dense requirement for employees per square foot, those parking numbers are going to go up tremendously, as you can see here. You know, and additionally, Pelican has in the past and continue to do so, they house regularly scheduled client meetings, which in turn bring in 20 to 30 people from all areas of South United States. So the functional need for the parking is a prerequisite for this project moving forward. And without it, it's going to put a significant hamper on them pulling the trigger to continue with this. And to further that, if the board does support and approve the variances as stated today, as I mentioned with staff in our meetings in the past, while the building plans are still probably 3 to 4 months out from being finished, the functional need for parking for this project, both presently and in the future, is such that they're going to pull a site development permit here, hopefully in the next 30 days once the civil plans are finished. And they're actually going to go in and construct about 30 parking spaces on this new lot just to be able to satisfy the parking needs of their current facility. So, you know, that's going to be 30 cars just really to house what they currently have under operations and staff right now. So, you know, 12, 13 cars, I think, which was created by the new plan may seem minimal, but it is a vital and functional need for Pelican Energy moving forward.
Let me ask you just one further question. The walkway, how high is that walkway going to be?
Well, it's going to connect at the second floor, so you're looking at probably around 20 feet or so, about 20, 21 feet. The buildings are going to be mirrored very similar architecturally, just to kind of create a common campus theme. But I think the joist-bearing line is about 18 feet. So you figure your joists are about 2 foot in depth plus your concrete. So you're looking at about 20 feet, a little over 20 feet.
Ms. Reagan, but you feel that the walkway may affect some of the other live oaks that they're going to keep there?
There are three
I'm not
that
talking
are,
about the ones taken down. I'm talking about the
Right,
ones
there-
that are going to
there are
remain.
3 more that are in proximity that are 30 inches or larger. So, you know, on a tree survey, you just get a little circle. So I don't know what the actual canopy is, but they said they had their landscape architect take a look at it, and they think they could prune them.
Yeah,
You wanna
we
speak more to that?
I did. We had Reich Associates out of Baton Rouge who does a lot of our landscape design work, and will continue on this project. They did confirm that the Class A and B trees could be met as requirements. I think one of Regan's comment, I think, with item number 2. But they also did indicate that any of the existing trees, which we're trying to salvage as many as we can, and I think Pelican and the designers have done a good job of incorporating that. Those can be pruned back. Canopies can be trimmed accordingly to clear the sky bridge. The intent is to try to save as many of these oaks as we functionally can. You know, it could have been easy to come in and just request some additional trees to be taken out, but Pelican likes their park-like setting they have in the front, and they do want to try to maintain as many trees as they possibly can for this second phase of their campus.
That's all the questions I had. Mr. Gordon, excuse me. Once you hit your request again, Greg, I think I hit the wrong button. Put your request, okay. All right, yeah. Go ahead, Greg.
All right, have y'all considered doing what Clico does and just cut a big giant horseshoe in the middle of the oak tree and send that sky bridge right through there?
No, we're planning not to do that.
Okay.
Based on the canopies and based on the proximity of the sky bridge to them.
Because that's really attractive. I mean, it's,
Oh, yeah,
you know, it's a
it's
unique
the new
design
thing.
for an
Yeah.
oak tree.
Clico just looks to try to get from point A to point B, and I understand that, but
What is the elevation of your property?
I
don't
think
need, I'm sorry. Are you bringing in fill?
we are.
How
There's
much?
probably going to be about 2.5, 3 feet of fill, which is an item that does tend to be conducive to or to saving oak trees in the future. Where we're saving
That's
oak trees.
conducive to saving them?
No, I misspoke. It definitely
Detrimental.
precludes you from the chance to save them effectively. But as we have on other projects, particularly these live oaks that are going to be saved in islands, very, very little fill, if any, will be brought up and around the tree. We'll have some drainage, subsurface drainage to kind of collect some of the low-standing water to get those away from the tree. But it does, as you start bringing in fill to any of these sites, it does make it a little bit more difficult to effectively salvage them. But we have been successful in some areas in the past by doing that.
Are you bringing up the parking lot because of flooding in the area, or just because you're trying to maintain an elevation with the building?
I don't necessarily think flooding is a concern here. I think there is there is a portion of the property, I think in the very back, that does fall in flood zone C, but just being able to get the property up to street level, where the current Ashland Way is currently constructed, is going to involve probably about 1.5 feet, 2 feet of fill in the parking lot, and probably in the neighborhood of about 4 feet in the building pad.
And is that a requirement, just for staff, is that a requirement to
It's
put-
not required to fill the parking lot. The parking lot doesn't have to meet the base flood elevation, but that's a choice.
Okay, so have y'all considered not doing that maybe in hopes, because you know it's going to happen. We can point to numerous projects. They put in all the stuff, the trees die.
Right.
Oh, sorry, the tree died.
Well, I mean, Tony can speak on that a little bit too, but I mean, Pelican has made a commitment to try to salvage as many as they functionally can. I mean, you see what they've created with their park here, and there's obviously, as you can see on the plan, there's still, I think, over 20 live oaks that are going to remain on the property. The part of the issue kind of locking us in with grades is the fact that we've got an existing property that's built here to the north. We've got an elevation that we have to maintain and meet, for driveway access and connections to Ashland Way. So there are some limitations on, you don't just necessarily have a clean slate here to start from. We've got a lot of existing improvements that we have to tie into from a connection standpoint.
Yeah, but you can slope a driveway. In other words, you're not putting in a new driveway. You're only putting one new driveway in off Ashland Way. The one you're tying in between the two buildings, I mean, that could slope down from a higher elevation down to a lower parking lot if you had to. I mean, obviously, if you could lower the parking lot on the new building site, it's going to facilitate the health of the existing oaks. Would you not agree with that?
Well, I think less fill you bring in always is better for it. But like I mentioned, we've had in the past brought in fill on projects similar to this and had a very successful.
How'd we do at Rouse's?
We saved 3 live oaks there.
How many did we lose once the fill and all went in?
Talking about copper still. I think there was a total of 12 or 13 oaks on that whole property that were removed. But we salvaged either 3 or 4. And granted, the project's only a year old, but those appear to be doing well even after all the work. So.
But what is the problem with lowering the parking lot a little bit in an effort to deal with this? Because what you're going to do is you're going to make holes in the parking lot for these oak trees, and then you're going to put subsurface drainage in to get the water out of there so they don't drown, right?
Correct, and where applicable.
What is the problem with lowering the parking lot a little bit on this other building?
The big problem, I would say now, in a heavy rain, Ashland Way floods and holds water.
That was my question. Are y'all putting this up there at a certain height because of flooding or not?
Yeah, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear enough, but yeah, we're we're locked in terms of a lot of existing elevations with the road right now. And
Forget
as
the
Tony-
road.
Yeah, well, Tony had mentioned, they have experienced flooding across Ashland Oaks, and I'm not sure if it's extended into your property in the past, but
It gets into the parking lot in the beginning, in the front of the parking lot.
I mean, I've driven down and you can't, in a hard rain, you can't even
Can't even
drive
get into
down
the-
that entranceway. I
Correct.
mean,
We have
Ashland is
to-
underwater.
We have to go in and put reflectors in a heavy rain, so
Just to
our
guide
employees don't drive. into
Right,
the ditches.
so, but once it gets back to your property, is it on your property or is the water?
Yes,
is-
it's in the ditch overflows in the beginning of the parking lot gets water in.
I don't have a problem with the motion that's on the floor right now. I just know what happens, everybody tries, but you end up losing oak trees with the parking lot because of what takes place. I mean, it's the nature of the beast, and if there's a way to lower the parking lot a little bit and help facilitate the health of these trees, it just seems to me a no-brainer. The only place you've got two cut-through driveways. You've already got an elevation on one, you slope it down to the other one, even if you drop it a foot, you're helping the situation and you're saving money on your fill. So is that something you all are willing maybe to consider?
We would consider it.
yeah, it'll ultimately get, once it gets to civil design, which will hopefully get here released, following a favorable board approval.
And then-
those plans would come into planning and engineering hopefully within the next 30 days.
All right, this question for Reagan. If project goes through, they do everything, they do their due diligence, and they still lose 4 of the nice oak trees around the parking lot, what is their requirements to deal with that? Do they,
Well, the ordinance says that they have to maintain anything in the buffers and they'd have to replant for anything that died. So if it were a live oak, they'd have to come back and plant more live oaks somewhere on the site, or if that wasn't a possibility, mitigate through paying into the tree bank or doing a variety of other trees in their buffers, whatever they could fit.
I know, but you kill a 24-inch and then you replant a 6-foot-tall little oak tree? that
So
the way
we
to-
would go back to, there's a sheet in here that shows the grades of the different live oaks. So let's say it was a grade C and it was 24 inches, then they would have to mitigate for 12 inches or 50% based on the grade C. So they'd have to plant 12 inches of live oaks. So usually they plant 2.5-inch live oaks.
2.5 to 3 inch live
Yeah.
oaks.
So let's say they plant 4 3-inch live oaks for a 24-inch oak that gets removed.
I mean, this is a very heavily wooded area. Is there even place to plant
Well,
stuff
that's
like?
the issue. That's why everything that is being requested to remove is, the only option is to plant into, or pay into the tree bank, because there's nowhere else to put more live oaks on this site.
Well,
So
that's-
it is what it is.
Can they be forced to replace what's lost in the parking lot with the same size tree?
No. I mean, there's no way to get 24-inch live oak. That's a Walt Disney situation. I mean, typically a 2.5-inch will do better than a 4-inch or a 6-inch live oak anyway, because they'll acclimate better. We could request that they put hard fencing on all the trees, throughout construction, just to try to make sure that we don't lose any due to compaction during construction.
That's my next question. Who's the builder for this new building?
We would be, Gulf States Construction Services.
You would be.
That's correct.
What's y'all's practice for protecting trees during construction?
We've typically, just as we've done on Copper Still and other projects in the area, we've pretty much just taken the canopy of the tree and come around with orange construction fencing, which is regularly inspected through, just as we inspect the stormwater pollution prevention plan on a daily basis. Those are maintained through there. And it's not your standard cheap construction fencing. It's backed, metal-lined fencing, which tends to hold up over time. The key with it is really just you have to be diligent about maintaining the fencing around the trees.
The
and make it a
trees
practice.
in the parking lot that are on the perimeter of the parking lot, where it's like a horseshoe, it's open, the back sides are open, so water will just drain out. In other words, you're not completely encasing the tree in concrete. there's an open space, if I'm reading this correctly.
Yeah, there's a, are you talking about where the Sky Bridge goes?
No, forget the Sky Bridge. I'm talking about
On
the
the north
perimeter
buffer.
of the second building, the new building.
Yeah,
The
along
perimeter
the,
of the parking lot,
along the Ashland Way?
no,
Oh, in the back?
down
Yeah, the-
south and east.
East,
Okay. Yeah, there,
Those big oak trees are in little islands, kind of.
that is correct, and there's no paving behind those
So
islands.
how wide are those?
I don't have a scale on me.
I don't
but-
either.
But
They
you-
look
you-
like they're about 20 feet, I'm just guessing.
They're pretty large, and these islands are a little bit bigger than what's required by code. It's well above that to hopefully salvage and maintain those oaks moving forward. And I think that was one of the items that was brought up earlier. We enlarged some of these islands, and that's why you kind of see some of these curved drives and kind of odd-shaped islands. It was mainly just to extend and expand upon what the parish minimums were to hopefully create a healthy environment for these trees that are to be salvaged.
All right, thank you.
do we have any more questions of the applicant? Does anybody need a little more time? Because like, we do have a motion on the floor.
Yeah.
You- I'll give you, I won't rush the vote if you need a little more time to think about this.
And I'll mention too, just real quick, I mean, as Tony had mentioned before, I think Pelican has done a lot to try to salvage as many oak trees as they can on the project as a whole. You know, counting the park that they created in the front, which was a completely separate lot that was incorporated into their current office building. You know, plus having the ability to hopefully try to salvage as many oak trees as we can to, at a minimum, meet the functional needs of their parking and expansion needs. So, just wanted to make sure the board was aware of that.
Just about. Greg, do you have any other? I'm gonna,
You're gonna what?
call for the vote on the motions. That's what I'm gonna do. You have any other questions?
Can I filibuster?
You can try, but I don't think it's gonna
Read the
pass.
dictionary.
I mean, you know, we have an awful lot of stuff in front of us. And it takes a minute to digest it and go through it. So, you know, the fact that I need a little bit more time just to think about what's going on and be clear in my mind, I don't see why that's an issue.
That
We have a
should,
motion, is there a time, do we have some kind of a bylaws thing that says we gotta vote on this as soon as someone stops talking?
not that I'm aware of. I mean, I've referred that to legal, but I don't think we have any time. I mean, we in open discussion right now of a thing. If you need more time,
Well, already
I
told you
personally,
I already told you
personally
need
think,
more time.
I personally think before we vote, everybody better make sure what they're voting on. So
Well, and that's something Brian and I just cleared up because there was a miscommunication on that.
I'm willing to give you more time to deliberate on it.
What page? Tim?
Okay. Greg?
Reagan, do you have any concerns with these perimeter oaks on these islands?
I mean, I don't have a canopy line for each one, so I can't tell you specifically. As I said, you know, the ordinance requires fencing at the drip line, but we usually work a little bit with people because sometimes the drip line of a live oak can be 60 feet wide. Obviously, they're giving them larger than the 9-foot island, which is a typical island that you would plant a Class A tree in, but it's hard for me to tell exactly what the root structure is of each of these trees. So, as you say, you know, we try to do our best, but sometimes they make it and sometimes they don't in
Right, but
construction.
they're trying to save these particular trees. I mean, I'm looking at this and trying to be extremely understanding and flexible also.
Well, Well, it looks like you have a 40-inch tree, a 24-inch tree, a 24-inch, and a 36 in those perimeter islands that you're talking about.
And the
So-
only one I'm really, at this point, I think I'm concerned with is the one towards the southeast, the eastern side. It's at 24, and it just looks like that particular spot is probably only 18 feet wide if you take two parking spots.
18 to 20 feet.
And I know the canopy on that tree is probably well past 18 feet on a 24-inch oak. Right?
That's a good possibility.
Unless it's one of the crappy ones. Is that a crappy tree?
640, we can tell you how it was graded.
That's what I mean.
It's a B.
So would you guesstimate on the canopy on that tree?
No, it's a, 640 is a 24-inch. There's a pretty good possibility that it's, in the neighborhood of 30, 35 feet, but I mean, it's, when you say guesstimate on it,
No, I
you know
know,
what
I
a live
understand
oak
that.
looks like as it grows. It's not a perfect circle, it's gonna be lopsided, everyone's different. These are all grown up in a forest together, so their
So it
could
canopies
be
are not gonna
dimensioned.
be,
And that's been the
Circular.
issue with a lot of these projects, like Regan has mentioned. They're surrounded by oak trees, so very few of them grow to true quality specimens. I'm unsure exactly. It's been a little while since Regan and I have looked at these in the past, but I would concur with Regan on that.
Mr. Gordon, and the rest of the board, just as an option here, there's always a possibility of postponing this, and I'm not saying,
Don't need to postpone.
okay.
All you vote.
Everybody had time to,
Apparently I had too much time, so.
no, you have all the time you need. Do we have any other questions or concerns from the board members? Hearing none, let's vote on the motion. Has everyone voted?
Motion pass.
Okay, moving on. Our next case is BOA case number 2019-1441 BOA. Request by applicant in an HC2 Highway Commercial Zoning District to waive the required 10 Class A trees in the rear buffer north side of the property due to the presence of a large required drainage ditch within the required 10-foot planting buffer. The property is located at 2315 Florida Street, Mandeville, Louisiana. The applicant is John Chernecler. The applicant is requesting to waive the required 10 Class A trees in the rear buffer north side of the property due to the presence of a large required drainage ditch, required 10-foot planting buffer. Staff comments, please.
This is an existing office complex located on the parcel in question, which is located along the State Highway, Florida Street, and a parish road, which is Coffee Street. The variance request stems from a state regulation that does not allow for the property to drain to the ditch along the State Highway, Florida Street. Therefore, the drainage was routed around the property and fed into the detention pond and parish ditch on Coffee Street. In order to meet the drainage requirements, a large ditch was required to be provided behind Building 200 within the northern buffer to handle the volume of water and meet the required outfall at Coffee Street, leaving very little room for trees. The applicant has planted the required Class B trees in the northern buffer. However, due to the presence of the large ditch, it is not possible to provide 10 required Class A trees. Staff does not object to the requested variance since the applicant has met all other landscape regulations on the site. Furthermore, the hardship was due to a regulation imposed upon the site.
Is the applicant present? Please state your name and address for the records, please.
My name is John Cerniglia. I'm with Brownstone Office Park LLC. We're located at 2315 Florida Street, Building 100, Mandeville, Louisiana, 70448.
Do you have anything further to add?
I really don't have anything further. I think with the staff having no objections to this variance, we just respectfully ask that you approve this request.
Mr. Ballantyne?
Yes, sir. John, Mr. John, and Reagan, is there any responsibility or requirement for a contribution to the tree mitigation fund because of what's going on here?
I didn't recommend that because he does have some other trees that are planted on the site that he didn't get credit for, but they're in other buffers. So I kind of feel like he's already made that. It's just it wasn't shown on the plans.
Anything else, Tom? Mr. Snyder?
Yeah, just questions for staff. Have verified this property is not located in the city of Mandeville?
No, it's not.
Probably not.
You sure?
Correct.
Okay, because they did annex some property not too long ago.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other, Mr. Ballantyne?
I make a motion to approve the request for the variance.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Do we have any? Yeah, Mr. Brooks and Mr. Zaki. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions?
I used up all my.
You used up, no time, I'm gonna give you some more time. Hearing none, would everyone please vote with your lights?
Motion passed.
Thank you so much.
Our next case is BOA case number 20191442, BOA, request by applicant to appeal the decision by the parish officials that the property in question is not within a coastal zone, and is therefore subject to fill mitigation requirements. The property is located at 2626 Old Spanish Trail, Slidell, Louisiana. The applicant is Dorsey Development, DG LLC, Paul Dorsey. The representative is for Dorsey Development, DG LLC, is Ed Votolina. The applicant is requesting to appeal the decision by parish officials that the property in question is not within a coastal zone and therefore subject to fill mitigation requirements. Staff comments, please.
Mr. Tissue will make the presentation.
This site is not located within the coastal boundary where fill is permitted without required mitigation. However, it is adjacent to the coastal boundary and drains to the coastal marshes, Fritchie Marsh to be exact, immediately to the east. The developer's engineer has provided documentation showing the base flood elevation of this site is similar to and a result of the proximity to the coastal areas, and that it should be treated as a coastal area. Staff is in favor of the request. However, should the site not be required to mitigate the fill, the site design should still be responsible for not causing adverse drainage impact to adjacent properties.
Is the applicant present? Please come forward, state your name and address for the records, please.
Hi, good evening. Ed Voltolina with Dorsey Development DG LLC, our 3636 North Causeway Boulevard, Suite 200 in Metairie, Louisiana, 7002.
Mr. Votolini, do you have anything further to add?
We just ask you that we agree with the staff's recommendation, and the property is actually in the city of Slidell, and because of the annexation, some of the annexation laws, whatever, we're asked to comply with the fill mitigation requirements in the St. Tammany Parish, and that's just why we're asking for this variance, for this waiver.
Okay. Mr. Gordon?
Yeah, that was my question. I thought this was in the city of Slidell.
It is in the city of Slidell, and we've pretty much complied with everything the city asked us, but there was some quirk of the annexation ordinance that required, because it was annexed after a certain date, we were required to,
Shared sales tax.
I think some kind of sales tax or something, but it was something with the fill mitigation we're required to comply with.
Could someone explain that, how we dealing with the fill in the city?
You should be on.
It's on.
Yes.
Yeah, in many of the annexations, then after a certain amount of time, as part of the concurrence by the parish council, in accordance with the tax sharing agreements. There is a requirement that the project meet the parish drainage, hence the fill and transportation, traffic requirements. So we work with the city staff to make sure it complies with the most restrictive of both jurisdictions. In this case, the city doesn't have the fill mitigation requirements, we do, so we
Right.
needed to come to the board for the relief. Couldn't do it at a staff level.
But we do have legal authority to deal with this.
Yes. Yes, there's provision in the fill ordinance that says that if there's a question about this, it can come to the board. So it's not a staff person making the discussion, it's put out in the public realm, and discussion can be made as to whether it's appropriate or not.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Brookter?
Staff, could you talk a little bit more about coastal zoning? I'm not really heard that term used a lot.
It is that area that is, and it's a designation determined by the engineering department. It's that area that would be be impacted by coastal flooding, if it's impacted by flooding, as opposed to riverine. If you get much further north of this site, where you get closer to the W14 before it actually begins to spread out into the coastal plain, it may be a different situation and be subject to the fill mitigation, as was the previous case that you dealt with on Boulevard, who had a different set of circumstances, where everything else had already been erased. It was this lone donut hole in the land. So once it gets to a certain point where you're not going to have the riverine impact, where too much fill can block water sheet flowing across the property or going through drainage, the rules change and no fill is required in that situation. The clearest indication is right on the lake. You do not have to do fill mitigation if you're on Car Drive or those areas. This just happens to be in a little bit further back, where it's a little bit more sophisticated review as to determine whether or not it's a coastal versus a riverine situation.
Okay, good, thanks.
Mr. Ballantyne?
Sir.
Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
The last part of the recommendation down here, it says that you need to be responsible, that you're not gonna flood the adjacent properties.
Yes, sir,
How do you do that?
we have our engineers have designed, basically a detention pond that basically will have, I want to say it's zero net flow, and that what is currently going off the property is what will be going off the property after we construct.
You finished, Tom? Mr. Snyder?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance as requested.
We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
A second.
We have a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, would everyone please vote with the lights?
Motion pass.
Thank you very much.
That concludes all our cases for today. Old business?
No old business.
That's good. He has no, any new business? Any new business, Helen? How about for next month? I'm sorry, you have something? Okay,
3
okay.
new cases for next
How
month.
many?
3.
3 new cases? You, just a second. Mrs. Snyder, you have something in new business?
Concerning the recently received email from council pertaining to the filing of a Tier 2.1 form, I'd just like to make sure that, for the record, that this board is exempt from that.
Yeah, unless y'all are on another board that has control of a budget that's over $10,000, y'all don't need to worry about that. I have one big board email list, so I don't segregate it out.
That's
But
what I
the-
thought. I
yeah.
just wanted to make sure it's in the record.
You are correct.
Thank you.
So you mean I filled out mine for naught?
Stole your thunder?
Yeah, nah. Okay.
I got emails saying the same thing.
Yeah, everybody's got an email. Do we have any other new business? I move that we adjourn the meeting. All in favor?
Second. Thank you. It's always a pleasure. You can stay.
Pleasure.
Honor and pleasure.
I will correct.
The minutes of.